Alright folks, this is the doghouse that Habitat for Hounds provides for local people anywhere within a couple of counties around here, and we give it to them for free. They cost about $150 in materials, and you can build this yourself because I'm going to provide the plans for a minimum donation of $5 to Habitat for Hounds. You can make that donation either through PayPal and or GoFundMe. You'll see the links below. Forgive me for the color, but the paint is donated by a local paint company, and they don't have any choice in the colors because these are their mismatch. These are the ones that people mixed them and it was a uh-oh. And I would encourage you, when you get ready to paint yours, get the highest quality exterior paint you can get. And mixed matches are extremely cheap. You can get them at 25% of the normal cost. Now, to date, we've probably delivered about 175 of these houses. Now, this is a large. There is a medium and a small, but it's just everything is exactly the same except the dimensions are different. And if you make that donation of $5 or more, I will send you plans, email you plans that gives you all of the dimensions for all the pieces. This video is to show you how to put those pieces together to build this house. Now, what makes this house so wonderful? First of all, it's completely insulated on all 6 sides, top, sides, bottom. It has a removable roof so that when you need to clean it, put in new bedding, it's easily done. It's got weather stripping around the top here that provides the seal so that you don't have any air escaping out there. You've got a door cover that prevents rain from getting in the door, and you can't see it, but there is a carpet door flap that in the winter you can let down, and because of the way it's constructed, it closes and stays closed. And you'll see that in the construction process of how we make that happen. Other than that, they're just the greatest they're really outstanding dog houses. The door, as you can see, is to the far side so that the animal can get over in this corner, get back in this corner, and get away from the door. And when we give you the dimensions for this, you obviously can adjust the door width to your dog. A lot of times our dogs, some of the dogs up here are quite heavy. So we've got a fairly good door opening, but you can make that door opening as small or as large as you want to, depending on your dog. So please stick around, watch the video. We'll show you how to put it all together. I apologize about my clothes when I'm doing this, but this is messy work, and I wear the worst clothes I can. So we'll get started. All right, folks, we're going to start on the base first because we're going to build that module, and then we can start to attach the other wall modules to it. Now I'm using a nail gun with 2.5-inch nails. The nails themselves are not going to be what holds this whole thing together. It's going to be mostly the glue. So you could use a nail here if you wanted to. What is important is that it's square. And you'll notice that I've got these 2x2s, or 1.5 here and here. These, I made sure these were square, so all I have to do is to force the wood into the area of the square. I just put in 2 because, again, all we're doing is holding it in place until we attach the plywood and the sheet material to it. And for this one, I don't have a cutout. These are for the walls, so I have to move it out to here. Okay. What I've done is I've put glue, exterior glue, on the frame, and I put the sheet for the base, and this is what's going to be the exterior on the ground part. And I've switched to a nail gun with 1.5-inch nails. What you don't want to do when you cut this piece is cut it too big, or you'll have to start cutting off the edges around here. Just follow, if whatever the dimension is for this particular piece, you want to go at that exactly or slightly less than. All right, folks. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about are the feet that go on underneath the base. This is 4x4, pressure treated and rated for ground contact. Unfortunately, you only need 12 inches of this stuff because the feet are 3 feet tall, 3 inches high. So if you've got a scrap or something like that around, then that's the way to go versus having to buy one. If you do, buy the 6-foot or 4-foot version if you can find them. But what is important that it's this type of ground contact, like decking material. Don't use landscaping timbers. I started out using landscaping timbers, and what I have found is after about 8 to 10 years, they will rot in constant contact with the ground. What we've done is we've flipped the base over after we attach the plywood to the frame. And what I did is I've taken the liberty of setting up the feet. I put them underneath all the way around, and what I'm going to do now is attach those. And it's pretty straightforward. I take the glue, I load it up real good. Got to open it first. Load it up real well. Set it down, and basically what I'm doing is eyeballing it so that it is in this particular spot right here. And then I'll put a couple nails in it. I'm going to add screws to this after I get all 4 of them in place. Because that's the one thing you definitely want all the support all the strength you can have on it. Now I'm going to take some 2-inch drywall screws. Put these in each spot, and the next step is to put the insulation in. Okay, we're going to put the insulation in here. The insulation I've got is R19, which is 6 inches thick. What you want to buy is the R13 that is 4 inches thick. It has 40 square feet in it when you look at it, and the Doghouses only have 37 square feet, pretty much 37. So when you start peeling this, you're going to probably use 3 bats, 4 bats, something like that, and you're still going to have some left over. Because what you're going to do is, whether it's the 6 inch or whether it's the 4 inch, you're going to peel off a layer that's equal to about this depth of 1.5 inches. You don't want it pressed down, you want it to be fluffed up. So it's better to go with a little too little than too much. Because if you compress it, it doesn't insulate as well. Also, do this outside, preferably. I just step out the door here and do it, because when you pull this, the fiberglass fibers get in the air, and they are carcinogenic. So I recommend that you do that in a well-ventilated outdoor area, something like that. All right, we put the insulation in, and we're going to put the top on. Just make sure your insulation is real evenly spaced. It's not too thick, not too thin. I had a spot right here that didn't fill properly, so I went ahead and took another piece and put over that. When you cut this piece, it's okay if you cut it a little on the smaller side than the dimensions I put in there. Matter of fact, I'm going to change those dimensions, and you'll see where the dimension of the framing is going to be one figure, and this is going to be about 1/4 inch less, so that you don't have any chance of overhang. All right, folks, what we're going to do is we're going to start building the walls, and what I wanted to point out to you is that this table is specially modified just for doing doghouse walls. Because I built so many, this just takes some of the measurements out. I can just lay the pieces in place and they fit. Now in this case, I've got this set of boards here, this set of boards here are perfectly square. And that's something that's very important when you assemble this thing. Make sure that everything is square, or when you start to put the pieces together, they don't fit well. So putting this in this place, pushing it in nailing it like this, you get a perfectly square frame. Now, what I do want you to notice is that this board right here comes over. It's a series of boards. It's actually a 2x2, a piece of the thin material that's the inside or of the base, and the plywood on the bottom of the base. So basically what this does is it mimics the thickness of the base. It's got a board here to stop it, so that when I put this side piece on, you'll notice, I'm going to push this back so you can see this, that this gives me the proper overhang. When you use yours, the detailed instructions have this dimension, and you can just measure it. You don't have to go to all this trouble. You can measure it here and measure it here, and if it's the same, nail it. Now the overhang this way is determined by making this side perfectly flush with the framing. Then if you cut your paneling correct, this will automatically be the proper size. If it's too short, it's not that big a deal because you're just going to have a little non-perfect corner. If it's too long, you can just cut it off, what's hanging out there. So basically, I wanted you to see this part because when I start to do it, you're going to wonder, I would wonder myself about what's the dimensions here and that type of thing. And you'll see that when you get the plans, you get the actual numbers for everything. Okay. Another thing that's happened since I started putting this video together, it's taken actually a couple of weeks and a couple of doghouses, so you'll see lots of things changing. But you're going to see me refer to LOCTITE Polyseal. It's actually Polyseamseal, but I've always called it Polyseal. This is what I've used for all the caulking. This is what you use to coat the roof so that you don't have to put shingles on, that type of thing. Works great. I've used it now for a good 10 years. Unfortunately, it's been discontinued at our local Lowe's and our Home Depot. So I've switched to this product, Alex Plus, made by DAP, 40-year acrylic latex caulk with silicone. Paintable in a couple of hours. To me personally, I believe it's the exact same compound. It comes out white, but you want to make sure you get the clear. The white has a different consistency. The clear does exactly the way you want it to do. Alright, we're going to build the first of the 3 walls that are identical. Same thing, starts off the same way. Use the nail gun, 2.5-inch nails. Make sure everything's nice and flush. I put in 2 just to hold it in place until we can get the sheet material in place. Make sure it's square. And flush. Sometimes, depending on the wood and does it bow or anything, sometimes you have to lift it up ever so slightly so that everything is flush. Okay. Now, I'm going to put the glue on. Take our material. This is the internal. Again, since this is going to be the internal, this is the real thin stuff, utility, and we just set it right in place. Now, there's some things that are very, very important. First and foremost, when you're looking at this, this is the interior, this is the base that's going to be sitting on, or this is the bottom of the wall that's going to be sitting on the base. So you want to make sure that the material is flush with the bottom of the 2x4 or 2x2. Likewise, on this side, you want to make sure that this is perfectly flush, because when we start to assemble this, and you'll see this, this is the side that butts up against the wall, and if you don't have it flush with the 2x2, you're going to have a gap there as well. So it's important. You can have a gap here. This is going to be hidden, and you can have a gap here at the top because it doesn't matter. So it's this one and this one that must be flush. You really want them to be flush. I'm going to switch guns. This is going back to the one with the 1.5 inch. And everything looks good. So we nailed it. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to flip this thing this way. And it's important that you do it that way so that the parts, this is the one that we wanted to have close to perfectly flush. This is the one it is. Once we get the fiberglass in here, we get ready to put in the exterior wall, you will see what the differences are. Okay, I put the insulation in the wall. Alright, taking the external panel, and again there are things that really matter about alignment, and first is you want it flush on this tuba 2. I'm going to call them tuba 2s because that's what everybody calls them, even though they're not. So you want this flush here. You don't mind if it's not flush up here. This is the top. What you do want is the proper, and it's hard to see now, but you'll see it when we start to assemble it. But there's a gap here, you can see, and this is where the other wall, if you stand this up and it's sitting on the base, the other wall is going to come in and lock right into it, and you'll nail it in place here. Likewise, there is a gap here, all the way across, and this is for when we set it on the base, that this covers up and goes down past the base, and is flush with the bottom of the base. It doesn't have to be flush, just as long as it goes at least flush or more to allow the water to run down and not get to the base at all. So I'm going to nail this one. Everything looks good. This up and show you what I was referring to. This is a completed wall. Notice you've got this section here. Another wall is going to come in here. Notice you've got this. When we set it on the base, this will cover up the sides of the base that would normally be exposed to the weather, and that's what the whole goal is to build this thing in a way that it's watertight, because you don't want water to get actually infiltrated. So this is our first wall. We're going to build 2 more identical to it, and then we'll actually start to assemble these walls on the base so that you can see how this is all going to come together. Okay, now we're going to assemble the most complex of the pieces, and that's the door. This one's going to be different from the way we've done the other walls in a few instances. One is the other 3, we always put the internal piece on first. But in this time, we're going to go with the external plywood on first. And the only reason that we're doing it that way is that the first time I ever built one, I did it that way, and I cut out these slots to do the nailing. And if you try to do it the other way, you end up with trying to nail through where you don't have slots. So just pay attention to the fact that we're going to put on the outside first. Okay? Now what I did is I made these spacers. Since I make these a lot, it keeps me from having to measure it. In the final plans that you get that are detailed, you'll have the dimensions of all of this stuff. But basically that's the layout. I'm going to nail these together. Push this over. I'm just putting one in to tack them because I'm getting ready to put the external on. Okay, push this down. Push this, pull this one over. Then I'll do these internal. I'm pulling this down. I'm pushing these down. Okay. So we now have the wall, or or the door wall framing done. Got it in. And as I stated, we're going to go in with the external piece. First we'll put the glue on. And oddly as it may seem, the same rules apply as far as which pieces you want flush. You want this side of the 2x2 to be flush with the plywood, and you want I've finished nailing this piece on the outside to the door frame, and now I'm going to flip this over, take some scrap pieces to hold it off of the table. Use these down here. I'm going to use this is a Rockwell Sonic Crafter oscillating tool. Different companies make them, but they basically have a blade. And if you get one of these, or you have one of these, I'd recommend the carbide bits, because they're good at, in case you have a nail that doesn't go all the way in because you hit a knot, you can just cut them off with the carbide bit. It doesn't wear out as fast as the normal bits that they have. They go out real quick when you're cutting metal. But these are like, this is a bimetal carbide type bit. Alright, so what I'm going to do, be sure and use ear protection. Now if you don't have this kind of a tool, there's no reason in the world you can't use a jigsaw with just a long blade on it. Okay, now we're ready to put the inside material on the door frame, and you'll notice that these are all pieces. And the reason that I've done it this way is that this saves you from having to buy an extra sheet of this material. When we cut out, you're going to end up buying 2 of these sheets, and you get 3 walls out of 1 sheet. You get the base interior, and you get the top interior out of the second sheet. The scraps from that will allow you to build these pieces for the door frame. The only thing that you got to really pay attention to is that, one, be sure and cut this piece so it only covers half of this board, so that when you put these pieces on, you have a nailer on this end. Same thing here. The only part that needs some additional work is where these 2 join. That's one place air can travel through, if air actually gets in there. It shouldn't, but it's also something that your dog can lean up against and eventually scrape or deform the wall. So what I recommend is just get you a strip of material long enough to cover the majority of this. I grabbed this piece. Let me get this other one over here. This will do it. These are one of the scraps that come off of the cuts from those pieces. And you can leave it as wide as this if you want to, or you can cut it thinner, whatever you want to do. Set it on here. Put a bunch of glue on it. Put a bunch of glue down here. Set this on here. And then set something on it and let it set for a couple hours. Then it should set up and you got a piece that'll be just fine. You can go ahead and nail these all in place and then put this on and glue it. Since I build multiples at a time, I go ahead and buy that extra sheet because I know I'm going to use the rest of it for additional inside pieces for the next couple of doghouses. But this saves you about 14 bucks, or at least that's what this is running right now. With Harvey just coming through, I expect building materials to go up considerably for all the construction that's going to be. As a matter of fact, it's raining out here right now, and that's from Harvey. So it's your call. I know it doesn't look that good, but It's on the inside. Your dog's not going to mind. So that's what I'm going to take this off and put on a solid piece, and then we'll get more in detail about how we put the door flaps or the door protectors on and the roof that goes over the door. Alright, we've got our door section completed as far as the wall itself. I've cut out the interior piece, and this is a good time to take a sander and hit these edges, particularly on the inside where the utility board is, because that splinters so bad and your dog's belly is going to be rubbing across this. So I would suggest you sand it on the inside in particular. Now what we're going to do now is we're installing the door flap holder, for lack of anything else. Not really doesn't hold it, but what it does is it maintains, you'll notice, got this board 2x2, split it so that it forms these angles, and when this is installed in this position, you have your carpet in the winter is going to be coming down here, and because this goes out at the bottom, it lays flat and seals instead of just hanging out there with air gaps around it. So this is the part that helps keep the carpet closed when you want it to be closed. Now I mentioned earlier at the very beginning there were two cuts that require 6-degree cuts on 2x2s. This is one of them, because as you can tell where this is slanted, you want the same thing to occur so that you can see that when the carpet comes down, it lays right on top of this and seals. So, with further ado, I'm going to install. Just flip these over, put some glue down, flip this back, glue down, flip this over here, glue down. And underneath every one of these are the 2x2 framing, so we can go right in, we can nail right into it, and we're guaranteed a real good fit. So now we've got that in place. And one thing I actually didn't do on this case, I'm just so used to doing it, but when you install these, the one thing you want to make sure is that generally, I didn't do it because I've done it so many times, but you want to definitely make sure that this side of this piece is flush with the door side over here, I mean with the wall side, because when we get ready to install this, that other piece of plywood from the other wall over there is going to come right up against through here, and if this is sticking out, it will prevent you from getting a good seal there. So always make sure, and it's best just install this first, then this one, and then you're good to go. Okay, I've spun the table around so that you can get a better view of what I'm doing here. But I'm getting ready to put the top on, and this is the second piece. It's got the 6 degrees on it. If you notice, looking at it like this, you can see it's got the slant. There goes some glue dripping down this way, and that's what we want. So we're going to set it right here. Make sure that it's flush over here. I've got a line down here to give me the right position. But now on this side, I've got a bead of glue down here. I'm going to flip this over and move this up to where they touch. Now what this is the piece that the side is going to be attached to. This is the piece that the top is going to be attached to. Everything. So I'm going to put these in place. The studs are right here, so that's why I'm nailing in this particular spot. And here, the stud in the framing of the door that comes up here and comes up here is where this is at. Now this piece, let me spin the table around so you can see this. What matters about this piece is that it's straight, got a pretty much a 90-degree here, because we're going to mount our side here, and if you don't do it where it's a 90-degree, it's going to have a slant to it. So I put it in place and nail it. And I go one from the top, just for insurance. And there's no stud under here, it's just going into the plywood. So what I normally do is I'll put a piece in, shot to the side, that will go down and hit those studs. And the reason I put so much effort into getting this on here and getting it on here very tight is that the most common place for people to pick this thing up is to grab the roof of the door and try to move it around. So you want that to be really capable of handling those kind of stresses. This is where the Polyseal really comes in, is that we're now getting into areas that are going to be exposed to water, and the door is going to go on this way. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bead of Polyseal right here, and the purpose of this is to make sure that there is no opening at the back here of the top. I'm going to put that there, and then I'm going to put a bead of glue here so that it gets glued to the wood and holds. Again, this is a high stress area, and I'm just going to center it up and flip it up. Everything looks good. I'm going to take my finger, run it down this edge, pressing that Polyseal into any void or anything to make sure that you got it sealed. And then I just come along and put it on the edge, because I'm going to do that later anyway. Because we're going to Polyseal this whole top with the edges so that no water can ever infiltrate that. Okay, that's the top. Now I'm going to roll this around and we're going to do the side. Some of that out of there. Now this piece is going to go up like this, and in addition it's going to be attached to the side here, and it's going to be attached to the top. And I'll do that using a cut piece. And what I generally do is I'll set this up here, line this up, so alright folks, this is a major video splice here. I screwed up when I was showing this particular piece going on, and I lost, when I was editing it out, I lost the majority of how this piece goes on. So I wanted to verbally show you that. This is a side piece here. This is a little longer. Disregard that part. But I wanted you to see the angle here. This is where it goes up and meets the roof. To make this attachment to the roof here, you're going to use a 2x2, bring it out to the edge, make sure that it is flush here, because this is the part that's going to be attaching. And what I normally do is I take a scrap piece, set it down here, flip this over, make sure everything is flush, and then glue it here and here. Then This is where it gets tricky because you got a lot of stuff. You're going to put a bead of Polyseal here. You're going to put a bead of Polyseal right here. You're then going to, this is where it gets fun, put some glue here, glue down through here, quickly put it into place, pushing it up against, pushing it up against the roof, holding it in place, tack it here, 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 come around here, tack it down there, and you got your piece on. Be sure and put lots of nails in here because this is the stress area when people go to pick this up. I hope that clarifies things. One other thing, in all the video that I shot, I neglected to say this, but at the point when you are going to putting Polyseal all over the roof of the doghouse itself, the main roof, that's the time you want to go ahead and Polyseal this if you haven't done it already. And just use the same process. You squirt out a bunch of Polyseal, use a putty knife to spread it out, coat it around the edges, let it dry, and you're done with sealing that roof. Okay, now we're going to have some fun because we actually get to do some assembly. What we're going to do is we're going to attach this wall to the base and then that wall. And the reason I've got it turned at these angles is so that you can see the way these walls interlock. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to put a bead of Polyseal right along this bottom. Another thing about Polyseal that I like is because it comes out in a bead, when you put things together, if you don't get them completely sealed up together, again there's a little gap, the Polyseal takes that into consideration and you still get a seal. Now I put one bead along the bottom, I put one bead along here, because this isn't adhesive, it acts as a glue just as well. Notice I stopped early here because another wall is going to go in here and I don't want any Polyseal setting up in that area. Alright. Now again, I'm going to review a few things. You can see you've got this overlap here, that's what's going to go down here. You've got this gap, which is where this wall will come in. You'll see it when I put that one over here, how it goes together. But it's as simple as you just set it up here. What you want is this to be perfectly flush right here because you're going to have another, this wall, and it's what I call the flat, will come in and cover this section. Alright, so we're flush here, and it's as simple as, okay. And what I normally do, you're going to do it again from the bottom, but I just take my hand and run along here, and you'll see there's some Polyseal that's squeezed out. And the reason I do that is so that in case I don't get back to this for some time, I don't want that setting up, because this stuff does set up in a fairly short period of time, hour or so. That's why I do that. Now, here's where you get to see the interchange, how these things interlock. And you'll see this wall, when I get ready to put it on, see here's the flap, I call it. It's going to go in position, and you now have a corner, and all we're going to do is tack it along here and here, and we've got the side up the way we want to. I'm going to turn the camera off and do that because once I do it I want to spin it around and show you some things about that. Alright, I've spun the doghouse around. I'm getting ready to add the third wall, but again I wanted you to see how these things mesh together, in that you've got the flap here. I've run a bead down here, a bead across here, and a bead at the bottom like I've always been doing, and then I put a couple of glob beads right there just to help glue this to it. Set it up here. Stick it in at the bottom. Same thing applies. This is where that bead, you get some coming out. You're going to put more Polyseal on this in a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Switch to the Okay, and there you have 3 walls. I wanted you to see, if you remember back earlier, we were talking about things having to be flush on some sides and some not on the other. This is what you get if you put a little effort into doing that. That if this is flush with this 2x2 going down, then it will mash right up with this, and the same thing all the way around. The ones that didn't matter, if there was a gap, they're inside here, and you can't see those. Now, in putting this in, I've gone ahead and put it in the slot. It's a tight fit, but this door piece right here, top, is actually hitting on this piece of plywood that's coming over because it's cut a little, it's about 1/8 of an inch too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm marking this. I'm going to pull this out. And then I'm going to knock this with my favorite tool. Okay, as you can see, I've got Polyseal in all the strategic locations. I'm going to set this door in place. I've got my notch cut out here so it'll fit. And basically, once it's in, then I nail it and we will have completed the base portion of the doghouse, except we still need to add the one side to the door. I always put it in at the bottom first because I've found that typically these things tend to come in at the top on here, so you have to squeeze them apart. All right, we're good to go here. Pull this back. Pull this over. You can see I have Polyseal sticking out over here, and that's what we want, because we're going to coat these edges anyway, again, and you'll notice that this is slightly short. Cutting it with a circular saw, you're always going to have a 1/16 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch error in it if you're like me. Now we're going to put on that door siding, and I've got it setting right here just because it makes it easy to put the adhesives on. I'm going to run a bead of Polyseal right down across this. And I'm going to put glue here. And I'm going to run a bead of Polyseal down through here. This is so, getting ready, and this gets one of those things that wish you had 3 sets of hands, but you put it in place, press up, back into position. That's good. Okay, and here we're going to bring this out. You can see that that's almost flush. Again, this takes the most stress, so don't be hesitant. There are times where, depending on the material, sometimes we get donated material, the plywood's a little thinner, I'll put screws in here. We're going to build the last piece now, which is the roof. This is the one that's actually more fun to build than any of them, just because it's got so many different pieces and parts to it. I've already got the frame put together, and I've got the glue put on it, so I'm going to nail that on right now. Alright, we put the panel on the frame, and we're now getting ready to put on the sides. And what we're going to do is fasten these to this frame. Now, what you have to see is that when we flip this over, because this is what's the interior, this is what hangs over the edges, so that if the doghouse top is moved or blown or pushed or anything like that, it gets stopped on this and it won't allow it to open up and potentially get water in it. All right. Lay these down, and I wanted you to pay particular attention to this corner because you're going to do this on all four corners. But I'm putting some glue out. Okay, now the way that we do these is that you make sure it's flush back here, and you're going to have overhang up here, which you'll understand, and I'm going to put some glue on that overhang right now. Okay, I'm going to flip this up. This is flush. I'm going to check the flush one more time. It is. Okay, now and push down on this so that you make sure. Now, this, if you can see this, you've got an overhang. Let me show it this way. You've got an overhang here. I purposely cut these large for this very reason. Now, what I'm going to do is put some glue along this. Put this up. Hold it into that glue real tight. Okay. And what we're going to do is do that all the way around. Now once we've done that, we get our special tool that I like so much that I can never remember the name of, and you trim this off here. You can sand it, and we'll poly seal the bottom of these, the edges of these, along with the roof itself. I wanted you to see this joint here. You'll see, I just want to make sure that you see it up close. And you can see there's some overhang here. And now I'm going to show you how we did it and why we did it. Alright, you start off, if you can notice over there, that's actually flush, and then it hangs out over here. This is flush, and it hangs out over here. This is flush, and it'll hang out over there, and the same thing will happen down there. Now what that does means you don't have to get when you first cut these, to get it to the exact, get everything just nice and smooth. You can cut them a little long, which is what I've done. I cut them about 3/8 of an inch longer. And then all I do after I've got them all installed is I just take the cutting tool and just cut that off. And then you've got a perfectly flush corner. It's pretty straightforward and easy to do. I've already taken the liberty to put some glue on this one, and I'm getting ready to put this up. So what I'm going to do is put some glue here, and it runs down real quick. And I think we're good. I always put one in here, and I have about about 9 out of 10 successes, but every now and then it goes haywire. We got lucky. Now I'm going to finish this out, and we'll flip it over, and I'll show you how to build the top part of the roof. Alright, I've put on the final piece there. I'm not going to cut this right now because I want the glue to dry, but what I am going to do is flip it over. And we're now going to construct the upper portion with the gabled roof on this, and we'll cut this off later. All right, we're going to start working on the top here. And first thing I did is took a board like this. You can see the line, split it so that you end up with two pieces like this, and that's going to form the gable. I've already put a bead of Polyseal down through here, and I'm going to put a bead of glue right here. And we're going to put some Polyseal right between the two. And then it's just a question of positioning. Let's slide it this way a bit. A good smart thing would have been to do is mark the dead center of this. Alright, now we're going to build the gables. I've already attached that one down there, but I wanted to go through this one. One tip I will give you is that when you get this portion completed, go around on all sides and mark the halfway point between these, because that'll come in handy for one when we get ready to place these. We can eyeball it, because these don't come to the end. They don't go, so it's not like you just fit them in. You have to go from the center here. Secondly, when we get ready to place the roof on, we're going to be setting it down from this side, and consequently you want to be able to look at where's the center, because it's your hand placing it. There's no measurements involved in putting the roof on, unless you want to do that. But you can eyeball it and get it within 1/4 of an inch without any difficulty. So alright, what we're going to do, first thing we're going to do is going to put a bead of our wonderful Polyseal along here. Now this is to seal this crack where these two pieces meet. Again, the whole secret to these things is to keep water out. Alright, and where these two meet, I'm going to put a dab, so that crack is sealed. And then lastly, I'm going to put a bead of glue. Part of the reason why I put so much of an adhesive on here is that when you lift this roof, you're pulling up on all of these places that it's attached. So I just don't want to take any chances. Okay, so I'm going to set this, here's my dot. I'm going to set this on here, push these two together. Ideal is to have Polyseal sticking out there. You want it flush. And now we're going to nail it in place. Okay, that one I must have hit a knot underneath there somewhere. So I'll cut that off. And next thing we're going to do is put insulation in and put the roof on. Alright, we've got the gables put on, we've got the insulation in, and now we're getting ready to place the very top exterior piece on. I've got a bead of Polyseal all the way around it, and then I've got glue on the gable parts. There's no need to put any glue or anything here, because when the roof comes down, it's only going to be touching on this very edge here. And remember, we put a mark for the halfway point on these, and if you look, I've done the same thing on the roof, on all 4 centerpieces. So when I get ready to set this thing down, I can eyeball it. Now what you want to do is set it down to where it's just touching here. Then as long as you don't go down onto the glue and the Polyseal in the other places, you can shift it ever so slightly and then start to put it down. So here we go. Okay, we've got it centered now. And what we're going to do is to actually attach it. Now you do one side at a time. We're going to do this side first and then go on that side because we have to actually bend the plywood into position. Okay, so I'm going to start here. Okay. Now you can do this two ways. You can just lay on it, or you can actually take some clamps and clamp it down. I normally just put my weight on it. Come over here, do the same. There you have it. Now what we're going to do is flip it over. And proceed to make sure that our polyseal goes all the way around, seals all of the gaps. Because again, water's going to come down, it's going to run under, and you don't want it getting into this top piece. So I'm going to do that next. Okay, put a bead in along here, anywhere there's a crack. Now, on these edges here, be sure and hit this. This is where the end of the plywood you cut off. Again, we go through here, get all of this done. Now, get that in there, this end. Next, we want to get the polyseal on the bottom of this piece right here, because again, that's where water's going to end up dripping down to, and you want to keep that out of there. After I finish this, we're going to flip it over. We'll put the polyseal on the roof. We wait for it to dry, and then we paint it. Alright, I finished putting polyseal on this joint right here, on these pieces right here, bottom and here. I'm going to flip this over, and then we're going to put the polyseal on top. So that you see it, since we don't want this to come in contact with the table, I've got blocks of wood underneath here, so when I flip it, the blocks are going to be holding this up and keeping this off of the table. Okay. Alright, now the fun. Make sure you don't have any kind of particle material on here, because when you're spreading this out, that'll interfere. There's a nail head there that's a little high. That'll interfere. I normally start at the top and come down, then I go to the other side. And just spray it liberally, at least in the beginning, because any that you have extra in this area, you'll just move to another. It's only at the very last part where you want to kind of ration it out so that you don't end up with a whole lot of polyseal left over. And it's just this simple. Take you a putty knife. Now we're going to go around and get these edges a little bit later, but right now we want to get this on. It's critical that you get every single square inch of this thing covered. You don't want anything uncovered. We're going to paint this, and it's my belief that the paint protects the polyseal from UV damage. I haven't tested that. I mean, I've had polyseal on stuff that's in the sun for years, but I don't know how long that would last. And as you can see, it doesn't have to be thick. You just want to make sure that there's a coat on there. And we proceed to do this until it's completely covered. Alright, I finished coating it, the top. Also make sure you go around this edge, get all of that covered. So now we've got the roof completed other than painting it. If you have fans, and you can't see them, but I've got ceiling fans up here. If I turn those on, and it's a fairly normal day, temperature's above 70 degrees, right now it's 60, but in this room it's 70. This will dry in an hour and a half to 2 hours to be paintable. That's how quick this stuff dries when you thin it out as much as we do. Once we get it painted, then all we've got left to do is we're going to put weather stripping around the top of the doghouse so that when we set this down, you get a seal so that no air can get in and out. We'll put in straw for the bedding, and we'll put on the carpet door flap, and I'll show you how to do all of that. Okay, the final step is to put the door flap on. And to make the door flap, just get a piece of carpet, or heavy cloth material. The heavier, the thicker, the better. You can see this is one that I use for my dog houses, and I've got it doubled up. So you can do double. You can also notice I went ahead, and my dogs like to look out when they're in the house to see what's going on in the yard if I'm walking around. So I took some plexiglass and put them a little window so that in the winter when it's cold, the flap is down, but they can still see out. Okay, now one of the problems with this is we're going to put this in place just like this. This is the board at the top of the door. We're going to have 3 screws, and you want the carpet side in. It does a better job of insulating with the carpet side in. Now what the problem is that when you put a screw through here and it comes out through the carpet, many times it'll wrap around the threads and it'll actually start to ball up. So you want to stop that. Also along the edges, this stuff will fray and you can actually pull off the material, and over time the material gets pulled away and all you have is the backing, and that doesn't do a very good job. So you got to figure out something to do about that. So what we're going to do, you can use, this is a propane torch, you can use a lighter, you can any kind of a flame source. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to flip this over and line it up to where my holes are going to be. And I can see where they're going to be. And, you know, carpet is a polyester, it's a plastic. So I'm melting it in those places. So that part's done. The next part is the edges. I just go right along the edges and melt those so that they all glue together in a way that will prevent it from fraying over time. You don't want to touch this stuff, I can tell you, it's hot. And since it'll stick to you. Okay. Alright, before we go out and install it, actually install it on the doghouse, I normally take a string and put it underneath this piece, about half hanging out. Because most of the time when I deliver these, a lot of the times we try to do it in the summer, get ready for winter. Because primarily we want to make sure these dogs stay warm in the winter. I'm in the mountains of North Carolina, and we've had wind chills here minus 15. So what we're going to do is we're going to prepare it for summertime, and we just roll this up. And when we get to this point, we tie a bow. And then come winter, you just untie the bow and the carpet flap comes down. And next spring, your string's probably still going to be there. You can just tie it back up. Now what I do, as you can tell from this one here, is I just take them off in the spring. Then in the winter I go out and I put them all back on. That way you don't have to deal with the strings and rolling it up and all of that. But when we go out to install it, what we're going to do is just go out there and just put it up in place and screw it in, and then it'll be done. Alright folks, as you can see here, I've installed the door flap, and it's as simple as just pull that string, this piece of string, and the door flap will come down. You'll notice that the wood I didn't paint. I use this is the last thing I do, and I grab a scrap. The fact that it's underneath the protection of the door roof, it's not going to be weathering or anything like that. So we're done.